Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where the Doge reads you stories for your listening pleasure. In today's episode of D&D Horror Stories, we have a few tales where lack of communication almost ruins Dungeons & Dragons campaigns. But first, I'd like to communicate that liking, commenting, and sharing the video goes a long way to help this Doge out. Also, if you like what I do here, why not hit that subscribe button and the bell to be notified the next time I make a video? Anyways, with that said, let's hop right into the stories. My Group Fell Apart by Reddit user Praey. I have played a few times, but not at all experienced. I play a light cleric who has developed a bit of a protection complex due to childhood trauma. The two major offenders in this story play a wild magic sorcerer and a cleric bard multiclass with Peace Domain and College of Lore. We have played a few sessions at this point, and it was just constant nitpicking of how I was playing my character from those two. But I generally try to take everything said to me in a positive light, so I just took it as constructive criticism. But the breaking point comes when we find a child caught in a cave that we just cleared a bunch of cultists out of. Out of character, I know this could very likely be a trap, but in character, my cleric just sees a child that she could easily help, and dives at the chance to get him free. This is met with immediate loud sighs and a comment of, "What are you doing? This is obviously a trap." I say, quote, "Out of character, I know this could be a trap, but my character couldn't stand by and watch this, so I'm kind of compelled to do this." And they responded, "Then why are you doing it if you know it could be a trap?" What? Because my character would do it? The Peace Domain cleric wants to interrogate and torture people at every turn, and is playing the most edgelord character he could muster. So in character, I have to defend the child from him. And then the player begins laughing. Quote, "I don't think you get it. I'm not above party combat. I will kill you if you keep making misplays like this." It's important to note that this group is a stitched together separate group of friends. The DM is a close friend of mine, and has already been butting heads with this guy, and for the sake of keeping the group together, he has mostly kept his head down. We settled this with him eventually giving up and settling to torture some other NPC. I spend my last spell slot, once again met to loud sighs and side comments, to heal the kid, and he ends up not being a trap at all. We then have what we thought to be the last combat of this dungeon, and barely survive, only to find out that there is one more combat encounter, but for some reason he is willing to let us go. But he is going to take the life of one of his subordinates that ran from us. I bargained with him to spare him in exchange for 30 gold, which is apparently a lot in D&D, at least at level 3. So we leave, but for some reason, those two are adamant that my god should abandon me, and that my character should be ashamed of herself. Because she is good aligned, and I let this evil guy live? With the exception of the torture cleric, the whole party is good aligned. So why isn't everyone's alignment in question? But they are both singling me out alone, saying that I'm metagaming, and that I'm acting out of character, saying that I can't ever RP as a good person anymore, because what I just did was evil. We then run into some guys looking suspicious, and I walk up to them and ask what they are doing. They then throw a spear at our warlock and hit him, so I think, alright, fight is on, and begin to swing at them. Then, suddenly, those two started calling me a murder hobo. They argue that them throwing a spear at us is just them defending their camp, which is fair, but if this isn't a reason to start combat, when could you possibly have a good enough reason? Which then starts a huge fight. And I've had it at this point, so I just leave. Like, I'm not enjoying this game, so why am I playing it? Then those two in the group chat set some ground rules of what they expect me to change before I rejoin the game. And they have a lot of demands, including my character being neutral now, was neutral good, and having a deep sense of shame in herself, and that I stop metagaming. They even said, quote, "I honestly never have any clue when you're in character. I just always assume that you're metagaming." I asked what I did to metagame, and no one had any examples. I told them that they didn't understand. I'm not playing anymore and have no desire to play anymore. Then they started asking me to come back, and that they are sorry. No, fuck you. So I left. They have had one session since I left, and now the DM has had it with those two as well. Now there is no more campaign. I know those two use Reddit and might see this, but whatevs. It was an incredibly aggravating experience, and I wanted to get it off my chest. This is a case of where it's what my character would do makes sense. OP was playing a cleric that, of course, would throw themselves in harm's way to save a child, even if there was a chance that it could be a trap. That is the opposite of metagaming. And then to threaten OP with PvP over it is childish. And even though the DM was friends with everyone, he should have spoke up about it. And then to say that OP's character performed an evil act because they didn't want any more bloodshed is kinda stupid. I don't blame OP for leaving after the other two players basically sent him an ultimatum on how he has to play his character. Then for the other players to not understand why he was leaving just shows their lack of self-awareness. And I'll say again, the DM in this case should have stepped up and said something, though he didn't and lost a good player for it. Though, what are your thoughts? Would you have left as well? I know I would. On to the next story. Am I the Asshole? Changeling Shenanigans by Reddit user BeautifulAd7. Let me start this off with, I hold no animosity towards anyone involved in this story, but my most recent session of D&D left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Necessary context. I haven't played a lot of D&D. I did a seat of the pants game with my mom and grandma when I was like 12, and I played a one-off in sophomore year of high school, and that's it. I'm no stranger to role-playing though, as I've played Vampire the Masquerade and associated properties for around a decade now. But when it comes to D&D, I defer to those more knowledgeable. And so, for my first real game of any length or magnitude, I wanted to be a Changeling Bard / Cleric, Charlatan, Chaotic Neutral, which I understand the stereotype of, but I assure you, I was to take this as seriously as I could. And in doing some research, I found inspiration to be an artist who challenged the notion of who we are as people in the face of wildly different scenarios. To sum it up rather quickly. I liked it, I ran it by the DM and no trouble seemed to arise. First session goes off without a hitch, but it's here where the issue is born. A grand session, really, but the first thing I have my character do, as an introduction, is to sit playing a beautiful tune in the guise of an orc. No fuss, no foible. Session 2 starts off, and I want the other characters to start getting in that something's weird about this orc fella. So he exits stage right, and is quickly replaced by an Aladrin. I succeed in getting a, quote, "Huh, that's hinky," from the other players, and I think to myself, mission successful. And then, not 20 minutes into session 2, we go to get off the ship. The captain decrees me as a stowaway. Perhaps here is where I made my own fumble, as I tried and failed to charm person my way past the fella, and I found myself in a bit of a pitfall. Already wary of me, I make the somewhat unhappy decision to break character to the captain by using the orc's voice to try and get things rolling again, hoping that he catches on. So, reasonably, he changes his charge from stowaway to doppelganger and pulls a gun on me. I drop back into orc form in front of the whole party, now a little upset, but not to the point of speaking out, but now he's called the police. I give him the bird and politely trot off, and I am then surrounded by the police. It's here that I finally drop my ruse, turn into my native form, and hope for this to pass on in a funny, misunderstanding way, so we can get back to the story at hand. Perhaps deservingly, likely even, I am arrested. Fair is fair. Now, one member of the party to the other two is repeatedly addressing my character as an idiot and talking down to him to his face, and then the story starts revolving around my trial. The DM, repeatedly, no less than 4 times, for the rest of and after the session, said, quote, "If you had discussed this with me beforehand, I could have made some changes." I rolled with the punches for the session, and kept my grievances to myself, but here's what I want to really tell you all. I don't, nor do I expect to have my hand held here, but this is a homebrew setting, in a game I already only have passing familiarity on. Supposedly, my character would have the knowledge that A, as a changeling, I was expected to be in my native form at all times on the boat, and that B, failure to do so, land me in legal troubles. But as an essentially first-time player, in a homebrew setting, how was I to know any of that? My biggest grievance, and again, not that I want to be handheld, nor do I want to shift the blame, being a jerk to the captain and trying to walk off didn't help my case, but in the heat of the moment, I didn't see any options other than to walk off and get confronted, or wait there to get confronted, hopefully more politely. But if I were making some huge, detrimental blunder in the very first thing I chose to do in Session 1, wouldn't that have perhaps been a good moment for some course correction? Or at any point between then and me walking past the man who my character, not me, knew had rules against the thing I was doing, would a, quote, "Hey, quick heads up," not have been warranted? I really can't emphasize how much I don't want to be given any sort of special treatment, but if my character has information that has potentially legal ramifications, shouldn't I at least get a nudge to that? It wasn't meant to be some big character-breaking con. I just wanted to be some shifty artsy type who made the other characters scratch their heads, but the DM is making this whole debacle seem like I was trying a diamond heist. And now, TLDR, I feel like I'm being punished and treated somewhat differently by a DM and a party member for being ignorant of information that my character would have known, but that at no point was made clear to me, the player. Am I the asshole for feeling a touch jilted? Edit. Right, almost forgot. I'm also a little upset that the lawyer fees took up every penny my character has. Also as an additive, am I the asshole for unintentionally derailing the game? I can't help but feel bad that, off the bat, our first real plot point revolves around my shenanigans. But I assure you, having a plot around getting arrested was the furthest from my agenda. Edit 2. My character is not an upstanding citizen, but neither is anyone else in our party. I freely acknowledge that charm person did not and will not help my case, and if that were emphasized as the reason I were in trouble, then I would have been more willing to say, okay, I done goofed. I'm in the wrong here. But I had, until that point, assumed the captain knew of my identity difficulties, and until this point, all he knew of me was that the orc, had saved multiple of his crew's lives, and that nothing expressly forbidden was being done, to the point where, during our confrontation, I asked him outright why he didn't just check the ship ledger to let him know that I was a changeling. I didn't think he thought I was an orc through and through, because, though I went to lengths to make an orc a convincing disguise of mine, I didn't take it as my alternate identity, so I didn't have any official documents. So I kinda thought, quote, character name, Changeling, may have been on there, but this is where our lapse in communication really occurred. I never specified I boarded as an orc, but I also never didn't, because we were dropped first thing into a scenario where we were on the boat a week or two already, and it didn't occur to me that may have been an issue. Again, there's no very hard feelings here, and the DM is usually a pretty fair guy, and I plan to see it through. I just felt like there was an egg on my face for not knowing the rules that were never told to me, and I wanted a bit of venting and unbiased opinions on whether or not I was in the wrong here, under the reasons the DM suggested I was. This story does seem to boil down to communication. It is understandable that a character that's lived in a world their whole life would know things that the person playing them might not, especially in a homebrew setting. If anything, the DM should have made OP roll some history checks before allowing him to change forms right in front of the captain, especially if the DM knew that the captain would react that way. That said, it is both on the DM to describe the world that their players are playing in, as much as it is on the players to ask questions about the world as they go. I don't think OP is an asshole for feeling jilted. I would just suggest talking to the DM to see if this could be rectified somehow, since this derailment took all of OP's money away, and then, upon moving on, communicating a bit better. Hopefully OP doesn't have any more stumbles and has a great long-running game. Though, let's get to the next story. A player rage quits because I decided to retcon a TPK he caused, by Reddit user RiseOSD. So, this campaign had been going on for a while, and was getting close to its end. Here are the relevant players. Fighter, an older guy, doesn't like people's crap, for some reason invited our antagonist to the story. Jim, the problem player, whose alias comes from the fact that I find it funny, played a paladin, embodied the stereotype of lawful stupid. There are more, but they did very little to contribute to the horror of the story. So we shall begin. The campaign had been going on for a fairly decent while, and they were around level 18. Before going to the final dungeon and winning the campaign, they wanted to mop up some things around the world they'd been stalling on. And on Jim's personal shit list, there was a dragon. This specific dragon was a white dragon I described as beyond ancient. This thing was a massive behemoth of a dragon who helped the party since the BBEG had wiped out some of his followers. Why did Jim want this thing dead, you may ask? Well, it's because Jim. Chromatic dragons are inherently evil. This thing's better off dead. Fighter. Sure, but we should focus on other stuff. This thing hasn't really been described as doing anything evil. What's the harm? Jim. Oh, come on, you're just scared. The thing's like a challenge rating 20. We can probably take it. Me. Hey, easy there. Getting kinda close to metagaming, Jim. Jim. Whatever, come on, let's just do it. Eventually, through being a whiner and stubborn as a mule, Jim managed to convince the rest of the party that this dragon needed to go. While he was right about an ancient white dragon being a challenge rating 20, this was not ancient. I often describe this dragon as beyond ancient, and towering over even other dragons they'd seen, since this thing was a white great worm. I think subconsciously, Fighter knew this, but didn't tell the party about it, for reasons. I don't know, Fighter was kind of a piece of work in his own right. The fight begins, and the party somehow miraculously wins initiative against this thing, and take a few swings. They try to take some swings at him, but deal very minuscule amounts of damage. I decided to be a bit merciful and give them a chance. This thing doesn't see them as much of a threat, so he'd mostly just do a basic job of defending himself. Even with that, his claws and bites tore into the party's HP, and he used his insane mobility to climb or fly out of flanking positions. Eventually, he reached half HP and started trying. He flew into the air and set down his cold breath on the party. I rolled almost max on the damage, and it was more than enough to turn the wizard into a statue, dead on the stop. It also dealt a sizable chunk to even those who succeeded. Jim. What the hell? This thing's way too strong. Didn't you say this was ancient? Me. I said it was beyond ancient. An expression of realization crossed Jim's face, finally realizing his mistake, much too late sadly. The rest of the party was ended by the dragon, destroyed by it actually putting up a massive fight. After this little fiasco, I did some thinking and extended the party an olive branch. Me. So that was certainly an encounter, yeah? I'm willing to retcon it, since we're so close to the end anyway, and this wasn't an optional encounter only Jim wanted. How about it? Fighter. Sure, sounds good to me. Jim kinda threw us under the bus here, yeah? Jim. What the hell? Don't throw me under the bus here. Excuse me for fighting the evil dragon. The DM never indicated that it'd be that strong. Me. I like to think I did a decent job at least saying that it was stronger than you expected. Just because I never said it's the king of TPKville doesn't mean I didn't say it was strong. Jim. Bullshit. Great worms aren't even in the monster manual. How was I supposed to know? Fighter. Maybe try not fighting the damn thing. That would have been smart. It eventually devolved into a screaming match between him and Jim, the two of them throwing swears and childish insults back and forth. I eventually just kicked them both from the Discord server so I could have some fucking quiet, and apologized to the rest of the party. Edit. Wow, this really did blow up, huh? Well, thanks everyone, and I want to take a second to address the common comments everyone left. 1. He didn't rage quit, he just got banned. Well, yeah, from what I said, I wrote this when I was fairly tired, and I forgot to include his actual rage quit. He sent a few personalized messages to the players, blaming them all for not being better in the fight, and then sent me one saying he was out. My apologies for the confusion. 2. I shouldn't have called him out in front of everyone. Yeah, probably. I was annoyed he basically bullied the party till they agreed to a TPK, so I was feeling pretty blunt with him. 3. I didn't stop them, or concretely say that they couldn't take the dragon. True, but that's because that's not really how I like DMing. I prefer a more relaxed approach. I'll advise and give hints, but never straight up say, quote, "You'll fucking die." Another case of a player misunderstanding the words used to describe a possible foe. Though, the party did go along with it and decided to fight it with him even after saying not to, so I would say they are also a little bit at fault. At least OP was willing to throw them a bone and retcon the fight, since they were so close to the end of the campaign, and though it does seem like the rest of the party were kinda giving Jim a little bit of grief over the whole ordeal, it did sound like it was just in jest, and Jim took it way too seriously to the point of insulting everyone and rage quitting. Though, what do you think? Have you ever been in a game that was or almost ruined by lack of communication? If so, feel free to tell us about it in the comments. If you have a story that you would like to be read on the channel, you can post it to the comments on the channel subreddit r/D&D Doge, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you and hope I communicate that clearly. Until next time.